Broadcasting live from Forward Observer Central Command in Austin, Texas. It's the man always out front on the issues. You're listening to Out Front with Mike Shelby.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Out Front. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. On today's show, I'm answering a question. I'm dedicating the entire show to talking about this one question. This is what I would really like to do every day. Spend 30, 45 minutes, however long you'll want to hang out for, and just talk about intelligence and strategic preparedness and how to win, or at least how to not lose. If you like this show, if you like the things I talk about, then please tell your friends about it. If you dislike this show, please tell your friends to watch and so they can experience the displeasure for themselves. Also, I post my show notes over at patreon.com/outfront. A big shout out to CJ, Curtis, Amos, and Michael for joining the Patreon Outfront. That's again, patreon.com/outfront, and big spenders on the $10 a month support plan. That's Stephen M. and William L. Much appreciated, gents. Thank you for helping me do this show. Here is the question we're talking about today. What are your thoughts on staying where you are and trying to improve your current location, or moving to a more red area, or moving to a red state where there are more like-minded people? We got that question over at Forward Observer on our early morning brief this morning. I'm really trying to separate Forward Observer stuff, which let's just talk about intel, what's happening in the world and at home. And then over on this show, let's talk about intel and preparedness and how to win, or at least how to not lose. Maybe that's a new tagline of the show. I don't know. I'm going to break this answer into two parts. The first, absolutely first step, the first thing you must do is do an area study. And we're going to get into the weeds here. By the way, Ben, if you can help do question patrol again and drop those in our chat, I'd appreciate it. All right. In an area study, you are going to analyze your operational environment. You're going to look at all 6 layers of your operational environment. You're going to look at what's in your area, and then you're going to do an assessment. And really, you need to figure out what you are working with and what you are up against. The whole point of doing an area study is to identify your assets, limitations, vulnerabilities, threats, so on and so forth for your area. And once you understand what your assets are, we can get a better picture of how to develop those assets into strategic advantages. And once you identify your limitations and vulnerabilities and threats, we can identify ways to mitigate those risks in the future. Now, after you do your area study, if expected conditions are stacked against you to the point that you don't think you can overcome them, then I would consider moving. I would consider that very strongly. And it kind of goes back to what our expectations are of the future. That's a really good reason to subscribe to Forward Observer, because we reduce uncertainty about the future. We talk about what's happening in the world and anything catastrophic that's going to happen to the United States. Right now, it's happening in slow motion. Now, the time to figure out if you have strategic disadvantages is right now. Because once you identify what those strategic disadvantages are, then you need to figure out if you can overcome them. If you have strategic advantages, or if you're in a place where you've identified your assets, they outweigh the negatives, and you think you can develop those assets into strategic advantages, then you might consider staying. And you're not going to know this unless you do an area study. Now, the second, and later in the show, we'll get deeper into that, and I'll tell you exactly what my considerations are. Now, the second part of this answer concerns how well you can develop the area. Is this an area with suitable physical and human terrain, for instance? Is it physically defensible? Does the terrain favor the defender? Can you develop the people who live in this area into a tribe, into a network, if you will, that aligns with your goals? Do you have a shared vision for the future? Do you have shared goals, shared outcomes? If you can, then I think you should consider staying. If you cannot, then I think you should, let me rephrase this. If not, then I would consider moving. In a catastrophic event, in a protracted conflict, in an area with threats that you will encounter on a day-to-day basis, like SATF, worst case scenario, whatever thing you fear is going to happen in the future. The people who surround you are largely going to dictate your circumstances. There are just things that you cannot do about the local there are things that you cannot work with the local, if the local population is against you. You're not going to get along. You're not going to go along with local population, with neighbors who are against you. And if you find yourself in that situation, you need to determine that quick, fast, and in a hurry. By the way, I'm not a hair on fire, world is ending, America's going to collapse overnight, you better not miss it kind of thing, stay up late, wait for Santa to come down the chimney kind of thing. That's not me. I think America is in decline. I think this is going to be a decadal process. I think living in most cities are just going to get progressively worse, no pun intended. And crime's going to rise. And the America that we knew, the America that I grew up in, I'm still a relatively young guy. The America I grew up in does not exist coast to coast anymore. It exists in small pockets, and those pockets are getting smaller. And that's just a fact of reality. It happens to all empires. That is another reason why I'm over my denial and grief phase of the end of the American empire. I'm to the phase now where let's build some first world zones in a third world country, and let's make sure that the next generation has it better than we do now. And that also includes not trading the current tyranny for another tyranny, which tends to happen. All right. So in terms of preparedness, I guess I should say in these terms, preparedness is not the accumulation of stuff. You can only shoot one rifle at a time. Unless you've got a platoon, I don't see why you should have that many rifles for most of you. Now, in these terms, preparedness is the development of people, the development of a tribe, the development of their skills. Put them into an organization, a formal or informal organization, such as, I don't know, maybe a network. Let's network these people. Let's build them up. Let's get them skills. Let's turn these people into assets that can be a strategic advantage, an unassailable strategic advantage for the area. If you can do that, my friends, you'll be doing better than most. You'll probably be in the top one. You will be the 1% of this country. Now, if we're talking about moving or strategically relocating, due to your expectation that something bad is going to happen, this is absolutely where you must start. You have to do an area study, look at your assets, vulnerabilities, see what can be developed, see what challenges can be overcome. Then you'll be well on your way to answering this question for yourself, because I can't answer it for you. We're going to get deeper into this. But first, I do have an area study course that I've built out online. It's called the Area Intelligence Course. People tell me that they've really enjoyed it. They've learned a lot. If you know that you need an area study and you don't want to wait on me to get to your town to do a tactical intelligence course, which, by the way, those are drying up very fast now, just because I'll be honest, I don't want to travel anymore, man. I'm done traveling. I just want to stay home and hang out with my crew, develop my crew. So if you don't want me to wait to get to your area, which is probably not going to happen, tactical intelligence course, then you can get the area intelligence course online at www.grayzoneactivity.com. I'll put it in the chat for everyone, www.grayzone. There you go, grayzoneactivity.com. And by the way, you have to put the www. I told my web guy for, I don't know, a year, 12 months now, hey, if you just go to grayzoneactivity.com, it's not working. Yeah, he's basically fired. All right. And I'll get that fixed. So, by the way, I'm sorry, I don't recall who asked this question this morning, but thank you for this question, because this is the stuff I want to talk about every day, Monday through Friday on this show. I want to help people prepare. I want to teach them about intelligence, my view of, what you might call strategic preparedness. I'm not going to be here talking about what freeze-dried food has the most fat and the most calories. And, all those other, here's a here's the best compass you can use, and here's the best fire starter that you want to put them in all 7 of your bug out bags. That ain't me, man. We're talking about real stuff on this show, and I love it. I'm here for it, as they say. So again, if you want to help me support the show, please do tell your friends. We're not talking about how to get through a tornado or a hurricane. We're talking ultimately about protecting our way of life, if you really want to get down to it. Now, let's get into the weeds of the area study. I'm going to tell you exactly what I put in my area study. We're going to go through the 6 layers of your operating environment or your operational environment. We're going to start with physical terrain. By the way, before we start, here's a great question I'm going to jump to real quick. As a subscriber, are you worried about Outfront being canceled or blocked since it's not on the Ford Observer site? Does this factor into what you say or don't say? Listen, I'm here on YouTube for as long as YouTube has me. And if they decide they don't like what I'm saying, I'll move it to somewhere else. I think this show maybe even is like on Odyssey now, and we'll move to some other platform. I'm not going anywhere. As long as I'm breathing, as long as I, can, I'll do this show on YouTube or not. It just happens. Look, when a billion people are on YouTube, or how many ever people are on YouTube, when a billion people are on YouTube, you broadcast on YouTube. All right. And listen, I absolutely do expect people to bitch and moan and complain and eventually get this show kicked off of YouTube. And if that happens, then it happens. I'm here for now. All right. The first of the 6 layers of our operating environment or operational environment is physical terrain. In physical terrain, you want to go out your front door and you want to look around. And what are the structures in your area? And what does the road look like? And what vegetation do you have in your area? What man-made or natural barriers, what man-made or natural obstacles are in your area? With physical terrain, I also want to look at a topographical map. I want to look at terrain. What is terrain beyond my line of sight? What is the terrain in the general area? Are there any terrain features that would give me a strategic advantage? For instance, is there a lake nearby, maybe with clean water? Is there a bridge nearby where I'm not saying to do this, but is there any kind of canalizing terrain where traffic could be interdicted one way or the other? By the way, I don't know. I imagine these people are serious, but I taught a class up in North Georgia many years ago now. And they said, I asked them what their plan was for when all inbound traffic to Atlanta turns outbound, because they're trying to get people out of the city for whatever reason. By the way, that's in like is it Cobb or Gwinnett County? I don't know. Maybe all those counties. That's part of their emergency management action plan. In some instances, is stopping all inbound traffic and turning it outbound. So if you live in North Georgia and you're concerned that 10 to 25% of Atlanta is going to be coming up the hills up there, these people said they're going to cut down trees in some tactically advantageous positions, and they're just going to block the roadways. I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying that is one potential course of action. I'm pretty sure that's illegal, though. So, of course, I'm not advocating that. But these are considerations you should have for your physical terrain. Next, let's move on to the human terrain. This is very important. The people who surround you are, like I said, the people who surround you are going to dictate a lot of the circumstances you have. That is, if they're not a threat, they could be a greatly limiting factor for you. If the people do not care about the things that you care about, then you either have to lead them down the path to caring what you care about, i.e. inform and influence, or you're just going to have to deal with a populace who does not support what you want. One way, just on a very tactical level, one way to do that in your neighborhood is to start a neighborhood watch. If I'm starting a neighborhood watch in my local area and I get a lot of buy-in, my neighbors are like, I'm down for this because I don't want my house to be robbed. I don't want anything bad to happen to my family. And if we can all agree on that, then we can all come together and say, all right, well, let's start a neighborhood watch, see something, say something, and let's make sure nothing bad happens in our little slice of heaven we got going on back here. If you're trying to start a neighborhood watch and nobody cares, or worse, if you're trying to start a neighborhood watch and people are openly hostile to the idea, I might consider moving. That would be a factor in my ability to stay there, frankly, if I'm concerned about something catastrophic happening in the future. If I can't get my neighbors to go along, or I have indications that my neighbors are going to be openly hostile to my attempts to protect our neighborhood during a catastrophic event or emergency, me personally, I don't want to live there. Beyond that, what individuals, what influencers, what social groups exist in your area? Are there any groups? And I'm going to say co-opt here, and I don't mean it in a nefarious way, but are there social groups in the area that we can more or less co-opt into our preparedness network? And for those of you unfamiliar, a preparedness network is just a collection of people, and we're not a prepper group, and certainly not a militia or anything like that. We're just a group of people who have families. We're concerned about the future, and we share information, and we help each other if need be. If a tree falls on someone's home, then during a tornado or whatever, all right, as soon as the danger clears, let's get out there and help this family clean up. I know they would do the same for me. I'm going to go do that for them. The more local it is, the more beneficial it will be to you, because the faster you can get people to your area. And I want to use this preparedness network. I want to expand this preparedness network to be able to exert political, social, and economic influence. This is why, and maybe this starts with a neighborhood watch, but ultimately I think you want to extend this thing county-wide, and then maybe even regionally if you can. If you have the leadership and the capability and the capacity and time and resources to do that, I think it would behoove you to be able to do that. Because during elections, we can go campaign. We can be, what you might call a force multiplier for good political candidates. And this is one of the rare instances where your vote really matters, especially in these elections, which could be very close. And maybe 100 votes is the difference between getting a progressive and getting, I hate to even use the word conservative, getting a pro-liberty candidate in office. That's where it really matters. That guy's or gal is going to have way more of an impact on you than whatever Nancy Pelosi is talking about in DC. Or however, I don't know if y'all saw that clip yesterday of Biden saying that our greatest strength was our inflation, or whatever he said. All right. The local dog catcher in some instances is going to have more immediate impact. Where do people get their food? How do people keep their lights on? How do people get internet? All those infrastructure things. I want to understand how that works in the local area. Also, I want to know which, other than the city water or other than a well, where can people get water? If we need to get water to 100 people, where can we do that? I mean, shoot, if you need to get water to 10 people, where are you going to do that? That should go in your area study. How are we going to feed my neighborhood, or how are you going to feed the people in this area? That should not be, it's not your fault, but it is your problem if you do have that problem. It's not your fault, but it is your problem. And so I do want to build relationships with area farms and area ranchers. Just so happens in Central Texas, it's a lot easier than in, say, I don't know, Staten Island, New York, or something like that. Or if you live in a massive city, which is another reason why I live in Central Texas and I moved out of basically downtown Austin. By the way, I was just there over the weekend, back downtown. And I can say the homeless population has improved, but I was still, this one lady, she was like, I don't know, I don't know if it's meth or heroin or something, but she was wound up like one of those little, wind up toys bouncing around at the red light down there trying to get money. And whew, that's rough. I mean, she was just in rough shape. At any rate, that's why I don't live there anymore. That was critical infrastructure. Next, we move on to politics and governance. Who are your elected leaders and also unelected leaders? Because in a lot of cases, political appointees or people who just have jobs in the city or at the county or in the state, they at times can wield more power, have more power and influence than an elected official. So we have to understand these people as well. Yeah, maybe she was hopped up on fentanyl or whatever. I don't know what it was. During an emergency, how are these politicians, how are these elected officials going to respond? What are they going to do? If faced with, let me rephrase this. One of the things that I think is going to happen, by the way, this has already happened, I'm just following a logical conclusion here, is that the federal government and states are going to have much more contentious relationship this decade than they have. And they've had some, let's be honest, some pretty rocky relations the past 10 years or so. Going back to Obama, it's going to get much worse. Given the choice between following a federal mandate and following what your state governor or your county sheriff says he or she prefer or going to enforce or not enforce, how are your local leaders local elected officials going to respond? On what side, if there's a line in the sand, what side are they going to be on? It's best to figure that out now rather than later. Also, it means we have to update our area study after every election. So an area study is not just a one and done thing. It's a systematic, continuous process. We got to go back in and update it as things change. That's a very brief overview of what I care about in politics and governance. Also, the next layer, this is the fifth layer, military security and law enforcement. What military assets, what's your military geography look like? What are the armed forces you have in your area? Regular active duty component, National Guard, Reserve, whatever you have. Also, what local security? A lot of cases, like after Katrina, after Harvey, Houston and the Texas Gulf Coast brought in private security. And who are these companies? And I'd like to know more about them before they get deployed to my area. And then finally, local law enforcement. What do they believe about the Second Amendment? What do they believe about the Fourth Amendment? What do they believe? I don't know. Let's just say, what do they believe about the first 10? Because those are the ones that really matter. How is local law enforcement going to respond during this emergency? If they are going to be the jackbooted thugs that they so desperately want to be when they're writing you a speeding ticket, then I would be more inclined to move because I don't want to deal with that stuff. If your county sheriff is good and you think the county deputies are good or the law enforcement that you're going to encounter, you think they will respect the rule of law, that you think that they will not abuse their position or abuse their power or authority, I might be more inclined to stay. So there's a lot involved in staying or going. These are all the things that come into my consideration. And then finally, economic, financial. What is the economic and financial driver of your area? Which people employ, who are the major employers for your area? What does your area produce? Do you have an industrial capacity to make the stuff you need? Let's just say we do have grid down. Grid down's a bad example. Let's say that we do get into a physical shooting war with China. I don't think China wants that. I don't think the United States is in a place to make that happen, but let's just say we do. And all industry suddenly goes to support the war effort. Let's just say, do you have a local industrial capacity to make the things that you need? If we get into another trade war with China, if these COVID lockdowns extend into next year in China and their major ports are not shipping out cheap Chinese crap that you need for your local area, what is your ability to replace those supplies, replace those supply lines? That falls into economics and finance. And we got the Chinese commenter here. There's some guys writing Chinese in the thing. He must have heard me talking about cheap Chinese crap. So those are the 6 layers. Those are the 6 layers of my area study. That's just a very brief, quick down and dirty overview. Again, for those of you who are just joining, I do have an online version of this course. It's a full-length course called the Area Intelligence Course. You can find that at www.grayzoneactivity.com. If you go to /store, then you'll be able to check that out. Everything that's in there. All right. The second thing we need to do is, you know what? I was going to talk about area threats in the 4 threat categories. I'm going to save that for tomorrow. Let's get to some questions. Listen, but bottom line, you got to do an area study. It's got to be done. I would not even think about moving. I wouldn't even think about staying until I did an area study and actually looked at what the local environment is. Do I have something to work with? Can I build a network? Can I build a tribe? Can I turn these assets into strategic advantages that threats or adversaries do not have? Can I stack these strategic advantages? Or can I not? And if I can't, I'm going to be a lot more open to moving. And by the way, yeah, I just noticed in the comments, people here talking about cartels in Texas. Yeah, that's a big concern of mine. The cartels have an absolutely massive strategic advantage. You know what it is? They don't care if they go to prison. They don't care if they get into a gunfight and are arrested and go spend 5 or 10 years in prison. That's a strategic advantage that, frankly, most of us just do not have, because I care about not going to prison. I care about that very deeply. All right, let's get to some questions. Mike, do you have an area study checklist or template? I looked on the Forward Observer site. Didn't see anything in the library. Great question. I've moved all that training stuff over to my training company, Gray Zone Activity. That's at www.grayzoneactivity.com. And you can see what all's in the course. Peter says, sell you on the $200 area study course. I'm not much of a salesman. I will tell you that if you know you need an area study, you're going to be hard pressed. Actually, I will tell you this. You cannot find anybody else. There is literally no one else on planet Earth right now who's providing the level of training and the level of insight that I do on a day-to-day basis, or that I do in this area intelligence course. Nobody on earth right now who can come close. And if you need to do an area study, jump in there, learn how I do an area study, get that thing knocked out. All right. If people move to a new state, should they not consider canceling their previous voter registrations from previous states? Let's see. If people move to a new state, should they not consider canceling their previous voter registrations? Oh, dude, I don't know. I'm not even getting into this thing. It might be illegal to move to a new residence out of state and vote in your old state's election. I am not even going to touch that. I have no idea. How would you appraise a large Latino family / neighbor that does frequently shoot firearms? I don't know. Off the bat, I don't see any problem as long as nobody's breaking the law. So, if they're a neighbor, I would like to already know these people, but you should try to befriend these people. You should try to get to know them and, determine maybe they're going to be a great asset for you. All right. I already touched that one. Mike, what should parents do to prepare their kids? What should children learn? What should teens? Okay. So I think that they should understand fundamentally the battle between liberty versus tyranny. And at the point by 15 years old, they understand that and they can put it into their own words and describe why that is their worldview. I think you'll probably set them up for success in their life in general. But as far as what your kids learn, that's kind of a deep question there. What should kids learn? Fundamental differences between liberty and tyranny. They should understand private property, the proper role of man in government. If you get them, by the way, the book that really red pilled me on all this stuff was Murray Rothbard's Anatomy of the State. It's a fantastic book. And if I recall, maybe even a relatively short read. I read it when I was in Afghanistan. Andrew, I don't offer parenting advice, but the question is, what should kids learn? Man, that probably deserves an entire show, and maybe I can give it a lot more thought. But I would start with those. How would you conduct an area study on potential area you're planning to move to? The same exact way I would prepare an area study where I lived currently. You're going to want to go do some driving and walking, some drive paths or walk paths. These areas, such as key terrain, I'm going to jump on Google Earth and I'm going to zoom all around and see what's in the area first, do a little map recon, and then I'm going to get out and drive that place and see what's out there. And, leave the 4-bed, 2.5 bath thing, I don't know, to your wife or something. And I tell you, my main focus is on what's in the, maybe half a mile surrounding that home. At some level, that there is no house that could be perfect enough to put me into an area where I'm at a strategic disadvantage. It's just not going to happen. So at some level for me, what's in the house matters maybe less than what's in the immediate area. When talking about building a preparedness network, can you please cover how an intelligence analyst would go about vetting others, especially future talks? Yeah, we can probably do a whole show on that. We have hit 30 minutes here. This will be the last question, and we'll do a holdover for tomorrow, and we'll talk about some other stuff. Yeah, so tomorrow we're talking about the 4 categories of threats. We'll talk a little bit about that. And by the way, this is also in the Area Intelligence course, which you can get at www.grayzoneactivity.com. For vetting, I want to spend time with people. All these people say, "Oh, we'll get a background check. Go on backgroundchecks.com or wherever." Yeah, listen, that's probably not a bad. Let me rephrase this. That's a good step. I agree with that. I think if you're trying to vet someone, yes, you should do a background check and make sure they don't have anything, legal criminal issues. In terms of vetting, I want to spend time with these people. I want to put them in difficult situations and see if they quit. We did it back in, I think it was January, maybe February. We did a little outdoor, kind of an outdoorsy course where everyone was kitted up and we were carrying long rifles, and it was cold and windy. I mean, like, it's cold, Texas cold. The wind chill was probably like in the, mid-20s, right? I mean, it was quite nippy outside. And the people who were there on Saturday or left early Saturday, or the people who didn't come back on Sunday, told me way more about a person than a background check could ever tell. And you need to be doing routinely, gut checks with these people, because they can have a clean background check, but they just don't have the testicular fortitude to do the things that they need to do, maybe when the time comes. And that's a concern for me. It should be a concern for you. It should be a concern for everybody. That's not to say that that's everyone's role. And I'm not even a tough dude. Just come back the second day and finish like the rest of us. It's a very simple concept. I mean, everybody else is out there. All right. So guys, I think that's going to do it for the show. Maybe we'll come back and do a whole thing maybe on vetting in some future talks. As a reminder, I'm going to post today's show notes over at patreon.com/outfront. Certainly would appreciate the support. And again, tell your friends and family, go post this in all the prepper forums and the prepper chats and all that other stuff. I'm talking about things that I think people need to hear. If I weren't convinced that people need to hear this stuff, I wouldn't be here. I'll let somebody else do it. but not really anybody else is talking about the stuff I'm talking about, and really don't have the experience. Even if they are talking about the stuff that I'm talking about, they lack the experience. I've done this stuff in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm trying to export those TTPs here domestically so that we can win or at least not lose. With that, everyone, thanks for the support. I appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow, 2 p.m. Central Time, talking about threat analysis, do some basic threat analysis, go through that for everybody. Until then, be well and stay out front.